All right, everyone. By my watch, it is 3 o'clock on the button. Welcome to everyone from the Quad Cities, from Chicago, Wilmette, Decatur, Waukegan, all over the place. Welcome, everyone. We are going to be presenting today a wonderful webinar on IDEA and advocacy, the importance of understanding the law and knowing how to help parents enter their local education agency ready to protect the parent-school relationship. I'll let you read the graphic on there, and we know that advocate is an awesome word. Our presenter today is Andrea Marwah. She is the president of the Illinois Hands and Voices and also an outreach trainer for the Illinois School for the Deaf. Andrea is going to share a little bit more about herself as we move further along. My name is Maria Maddox, and I will be the voice behind kind of just helping things along. I'm the one there up on top. We may have Alyssa Jones join us later. She will be kind of behind the scenes as well, but we're your moderators for today. So we're here to help you with any technical assistance, deal with any questions and things like that. So many of you may have already participated in webinars before, but if you haven't, I'm going to go over just a couple of details. First of all, you will get credit for participating in today's webinar, and we'll also get Illinois State Licensure credit as well if you're an OT, PT, SLP, or a social work, nutrition, dietitian. Anyway, once the webinar is over, you're going to get an email. And in that email will be basically the evaluation survey for you to complete. When you complete that survey and click send, you should get your participation certificate within 24 hours of the completion of that survey. And the survey should go out pretty much as soon as we get this webinar done. So just be on the lookout for that. If you don't get it, check your junk mailbox, and it may end up being there. So some of you have already found the chat box, but I wanted to just go over a couple of instructions on how to participate in webinars. If you've done these before, just bear with me. The instructions won't take long. But as you know, webinars are awesome. I'm sitting in my office at home watching the rain, and I didn't have to drive anywhere today to come and participate in this training. And isn't that awesome? So I'm guessing some of you are in some places that you didn't have to travel to. Maybe some of you are in your office at work, which, okay, maybe you wanted to travel somewhere, but you're stuck at work. But otherwise, many of you are like, yay, I didn't have to deal with traffic or anything like that. Awesome. Wonderful way to do trainings. However, the downside is I can't see you. You can't see us. And so communication is sometimes a little bit of a difficult situation. So we have a couple of tools that we'll use to help you communicate with us and help us get kind of judge and feel kind of where you are in your understanding of the topic at hand today. So the very first thing is that chat box. You all found, many of you found it. You told us where you were from. Use the chat box at any point in time to ask questions. And when I say ask questions, don't wait. If you have a question that pops in your head, ask it. We may not address it right at that moment in time, but we have built-in question breaks throughout the training that we will deal with the questions. And there may be sometimes you ask a question that the presenter is going to be asking later or answering later on, and we'll deal with those kind of things. But as the thought comes to your mind, type it in. Also, you may have strategies that you've used, something that Andrea might share may just put a light bulb on and you've got a little story to tell along with it. Go ahead and type that in, because this is what we would do in a normal training. Somebody would raise their hand and share some experience that they've had. So think of it as, you know, what you would do if you were in a face-to-face training. Also, if you are having any technical difficulties or anything like that, let me know. The only thing that you have access to is the chat box. So if you were trying to use your microphone, it's not going to work. Only Andrea and myself have access to the microphone. Also, if you look at your screen, under at the very top of it, you should see a section that says Participants, and then your name will be there. And then right below your name are 4 boxes. The first one is an emoticon box that you can just click and you can show your emotion. Like I just put in a smiley face next to my name. So if you look at the participant list, you'll see that there are a smiley face next to my name. And hi, Jamie. Also, the second one we won't use, but the third one is a hand raise. So our presenter may ask a question of the group, how many of you have ridden in an airplane? Okay, she's not going to ask that question, but if she would, we may ask you to raise your hand and say yes or no. So you click it once, your hand goes up next to your name. You click it again, your hand goes down. So those, we might ask you to do that from time to time. Can everyone find that button and just click it for me? Yeah, see how it all numbers up? That's awesome. Okay. So then to just unraise your hand, click it again, and it'll go away. Thank you. All right, the fourth box under your name is a polling function. So throughout the training, we will have a couple of instances where we will ask you some polls, and I'm going to start with the first one. So we want to find out who's participating with us today. So click that fourth box under your name, and there should be a menu that pops up, an A, B, C, D, or E. Click the answer that is appropriate, and then we'll be able to show the answers here in just a moment. All right. And if you are an other, go ahead and put your other explanation in the chat box. Now, I have the microphone, so I get to tell you. So I'm a parent. I've been an early interventionist. I've been DHS staff. I've been EI trainer staff. So I'm a little bit of everything. All right, let's see if other folks. Everyone find that that polling function and go ahead and mark your role here. That fourth box under your name. Let me just circle it here real quick, just in case you can't find it. Anytime we do a poll, we do ask that you participate in those because that gives our presenter an opportunity to get an idea who's in the room. So let me go ahead and post the responses here. So Andrea, it looks like we've got a good number of EI folks that are participating, just early interventionists. We do have a portion of CFC staff as well. And we've got some others in here, so we will, hopefully they will put in what their other is in the chat box. All right, so I'm going to clear this out, and then we're going to do another poll. So let me find that one. Oh, no, I guess we're not. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to turn it on over to Andrea. And Andrea, you can hopefully remember how to advance the slides, and I will let you start.
All right, sounds great. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's great to be here with you this afternoon. I'll tell you a little bit about myself, you know, where I'm coming from.
Oh, okay. Whoa. Hang on, Andrea. So you're cutting out now. So try to stay close to the computer.
Okay.
And talk a little more. Just start talking. I'll interrupt you if I can't hear you.
Okay. So my name is Andrea. I live in Naperville. I have 3 children. My oldest, Samantha, if you're looking at the image, she's the one all the way to the right. Going that way. This is a world of special needs. And what I really loved about that was the legal protections that our children have. Ever since she was 2 years old, I have been teaching this class throughout Illinois, and I do national presentations on it as well. I am a trainer at the Illinois School for the Deaf, so if I use some examples today and they are deaf, that is why. I am also the president of Illinois Hands and Voices, and I do IDEA consulting for the Illinois Guide by Your Side. If you have not heard of them, it's a family support organization for families who have children who are deaf and hard of hearing. I have also spent time on the Naperville Advisory Commission on Disabilities, so I have a background in the Americans with Disabilities Act as well, and I do parent advocacy coaching, so I teach parents how to advocate for their children in the school setting. I'm glad to be here today. All right, so we're going to talk about what you need to know about the laws that protect your child with disabilities. Here is my disclaimer that I do at every training because I do talk about the law. I want everyone to be aware that I am a lay advocate. I am not an attorney, nor do I work under one. If I am giving you legal information, I am taking it verbatim from the law, where I am very sure that it is correct. If you feel that you might have clients that need more assistance than an advocate, you can refer them to special ed attorneys. So name that law. We're going to talk about 3 laws today, mostly the IDEA, which stands for Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We're also going to talk about Section 504 and the ADA. So here's our first question. Which of these laws is housed under the Rehabilitation Act of 1972?
So find the polling function that's under your name, that 4th box that we just did before, and click on the appropriate answer. You should have choices A, B, or C available to you. So A is the ADA, B is IDEA, and C is Section 504. Okay. Give folks a few minutes to think that one through. And if you're not certain, that's what this training is for. So don't worry if you don't know, because I'm willing to bet that Andrea is going to explain which is which. So we give folks a few more seconds to put their choices in. And if you can, please find that polling function under the 4th box under your name. Now, if you're participating by phone, I don't know that you may have difficulty with that ability, but all right. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and post the responses. So of the responses, it's kind of split between the ADA and the IDEA. So Andrea, so you can help address which one is which. Nobody chose Section 504. So let's see what you got to say.
All right. So moving on. First thing we'll talk about is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This is the website for that act, and I give this to all parents and professionals that I train, because if ever you have a question about the law, this is where to find it. IDEA is a federal law, so states pull that federal law into their state. They can enhance it. They cannot, however, take anything away from it. When you go to that website, this is what that first page would look like, and if you see I've circled law and policy on there, that's where you can find information about the law. And then Part B, which is children aged 3 through 21, is listed there, and you can go in and take a look at the statutes as they are written. Or Part C, which is where most of you are in the early intervention system, birth to 3. So that information is also included in there. So what is the purpose of IDEA? IDEA was put forth so that children with disabilities have a free, appropriate public education, meaning that they will be educated with their regular education peers as best possible, and their program will be designed to meet their unique needs. The purpose of it is to prepare them for employment, independent living, or further education. It's designed specifically to protect children with disabilities. So the 504 plan. The 504 plan is under the U.S. Department of Education. It is part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1972. So Section 504 also can protect children in that school setting, and we'll talk about the differences there. Their website is under the ed.gov website as well. From the Rehab Act, it's for birth to 21 in public institutions. So in order to be eligible for Section 504, a child must have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits at least one major life activity. And if you see I put here including with a bunch of dots after it, there are many things listed there, all disability categories. The person with a 504 plan does have fewer rights than those under IDEA. The people with IDEA have that document called an IEP that we talk about quite frequently. Those are different protections for the child, and we'll go into that as well. So here's what we'll talk about that. One of the main questions that I typically get in my trainings is, should we have an IEP or a 504 plan for our child? Here is where it can get sticky. An IEP is provided to a child who has a disability, but the way that it is designed is that child needs to show that they have a need for special education and related services in order to get them caught up to their general education peers. In other words, they have a significant delay that requires additional training and programming specifically designed for them. The beauty of an IEP is there are specially designed goals for that child to ensure that they're making progress towards their end result. In a 504 plan, a child does not have any of those goals. A 504 plan provides access into the public setting. So a child who is incapable of talking about their needs or raising their hand when they need assistance should never be put on a 504 plan because no one is watching them at all. They are basically, a document is provided that states what special techniques or accommodations they need in order to be educated in the general education setting. No one has goals related to it. No one is assigned to that child. So the worst thing is when we put our little kids on this, no one's watching. So a lot of times we come across a situation where a child is doing very, very well when they leave early intervention. But the problem comes because we don't know really what we don't know about that kiddo yet. So I often talk with parents about make sure you get an IEP, even if it's for consult services, to provide that child with advocacy training. Because once they go to that 504, they need to be able to fully advocate for themselves. I hope that that is clear on those two differences. So, the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. Here is their website. This is under the U.S. Department of Justice and Civil Rights. This is what that website looks like. And what ADA does is it protects children, even if they already have a plan at their school, they can still be protected under ADA out in the public sector. So this is the law that makes sure that public buildings are accessible to people who may be in wheelchairs, or if someone is visually impaired, that they can have braille or large print provided to them to read information. That is what the ADA covers and makes sure is consistent throughout all public entities. Oftentimes we think that because our children in school or in early intervention are protected under IDEA, that ADA is not needed. However, that is untrue. ADA will protect them out in the public sector, but ADA sometimes can even protect them in the school setting. The main reason for that is IDEA provides an appropriate education. What ADA provides is equal access, and sometimes equal and appropriate do not mean the same thing. So there have been instances where a child does qualify for an IEP, but one of the items they're asking for is not an appropriate, it's above appropriate. But they can open an ADA compliance complaint and they can get that item under equal access. So your state protects children too. So like I mentioned earlier, under IDEA, you are covered under that federal law. States enact that federal law into their state. They can enhance it, they cannot take away. Here is that website. ISB is what we call it, typically, the acronym. And here's what that website looks like. You can find information in here about all special education related information, including, and this I refer people here often, the IEP recommended document from the State Board of Ed. School districts are not required to utilize that document. However, if a school district decides to have their own document, all of the parts of the one listed in this website are required on that IEP document. They must be consistent. All right, we're up to the next question. If I want to take my child who is deaf to a movie and she needs a captioning device, which law protects her?
All right, so you should be able to go back to your polling function again and click the appropriate answer that you feel answers the question. We'll give folks a few seconds to find that polling function and click A, B, or C. I think you're going to be pleased with the results so far. Give folks a few more seconds to see how things are shaking out here. All right, let me go ahead and publish the responses. Unanimously, everyone said A.
Well, excellent, because that is correct. All right, so open for questions.
So, so far the only question that we have, Jamie's asked about a sample IFSP document. Jamie, can you elaborate a little more, like like a blank one, or one that I guess I need a little bit more information about what it is you're asking. So we'll let Jamie type up her answer to that, but otherwise I don't see any other questions. So while we're waiting, I want to let you know that as Andrea has been going on, I've been posting links to some of the websites that she's been listing. So if you wanted to during the webinar, you can click on that link and it'll open those websites right up for you so you can see. Oh, Jamie says that she just mentioned that ISB had a sample IEP. I was curious about a sample IFSP.
Yeah, that is a good question. I am uncertain.
Let's see. I'm almost certain there's one on the EI training program's website, but I'm going to have to look. I'm sure there is, but it wouldn't be on the state board's website. So, Jamie, I'll look for that answer while Andrea's talking, and we'll see what we can do. So, in the meantime, folks, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask those at any point in time, and we will have these question breaks come through again a few more times. So, Andrea, I think we can go forward.
All right. Okay, so our focus today is going to be on the federal law, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. We're going to cover the after they age out of early intervention. So we're not going to talk about the phase when they're in their IFSP today. More so, this training is to provide you with information of what happens next so that you can help parents to prepare for that. It is a very scary prospect to be moving from the comfort and the loving arms of early intervention to the school system. It's designed completely different. And so parents are generally quite terrified to be moving toward that. There's ways to make them feel a lot more comfortable. One would be to definitely talk to them about attending advocacy workshops, finding ways to understand the law so that they are prepared, because the more they are prepared, the better those IEP teams function. We're going to talk in a bit of detail about those things today. So, the law under IDEA states that a child with a disability has the right to a free, appropriate public education. This public education will be specially designed to meet that child's unique needs. The I in IEP, which stands for Individual Education Plan, the I is the most important part of that acronym. It needs to be individualized. If we're not individualizing it, we are not following the federal law. Oftentimes you will hear, oh, this is what our district does for children who have that disability. They are not following the law, because if they were, we wouldn't even be talking about what they typically do with a child like the one you're transitioning in. They need to look at this child completely individually. So regarding the IEP document, that Individual Education Plan, always think of that document as, let's talk about baseball. So when we go to a baseball game, all of these outfield men have of mitt that they're wearing on their hands. It makes it easier to catch a flying ball. Think of our kids who have disabilities as standing out in that field without a mitt. What is the IEP for them? It is the provision that is going to give them a mitt so that they can play on that same field as everyone else. That is a great way to explain it to parents because sometimes it's really hard for us to understand. So if we talk in terms of baseball, it's giving them a mitt. We often say that it is not giving them a golden glove because that would be the best education. We are providing an appropriate, which means that they would get an equal mitt to the rest of the kids out there. So IEP teams, which we'll talk about, have several people who have information or expertise relating to the child. Each of those individuals holds a piece of the puzzle. It's important to understand and it's important to explain to parents that they are an integral part of that team. In fact, if you look at the law, the first person listed under who is part of the IEP team is the parent. So it's important for them to understand that they need to be prepared, they need to be ready, they need to understand what protections they have, and ready to participate in the meeting. Many parents go to these meetings not even understanding that they have a legal right to participate. They just believe that the school is having a meeting to tell them what they are going to do for their child. It's sad but true. So the more they can understand before they even have their first conversation with their local ed agency, the better their relationship is going to be and the better their child's education programming is going to be. So, WDTAM, what does this acronym stand for?
So I've changed the polling function. You should have 5 choices, A, B, C, D, or E. So what do you think? What does WDTAM stand for? Anyone used that one before? Select the one that you think is the most appropriate, and we'll see what folks are coming up with. Never heard, folks have never heard that one before. I'm just seeing the results coming through. So let's see, I'll give folks a few more seconds to respond to the poll. All right. A few more responses coming in. You can use your chat box to type if you don't know. All right, so let me go ahead and post the responses. Andrea, if you would advance the slide 1. There you go.
All right, so I just figured since in the world of education we have to make up all these acronyms that I would make one up myself. So WDTAM means, what does this acronym mean? So it's just to make you understand and feel the pain of a parent when we throw around acronyms. One of the main things that I teach when I sit down with families is they need to advocate for themselves, even in trainings, and if they don't understand what an acronym means, which we are a world filled with them, they need to ask. That's the whole point of that. All right, so we're going to talk about a few of those acronyms that are very important in the federal law, and they do protect our kids here in Illinois. So the LRE, or least restrictive environment. Here's what the law states about LRE. In general, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities, including children in public or private institutions or other care facilities, are educated with children who are not disabled, and special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular education environment occurs only when the nature or severity of the disability of a child is such that the education and regular classes, with the use of supplementary aids and services, cannot be achieved. So LRE really came on strong, probably in 02, 03. I know it changed a lot of practices in early intervention. My daughter was in early intervention at that time. And I remember it used to be I would take her to center-based programs, and that's where she would have her therapy. And then it became more prevalent that the child would be provided any service in their home, which was considered the least restrictive environment. Same goes once they enter into the school system. The main goal of each school district is to place all children with disabilities as much as they can possibly do into general education settings. These all look so individual, but they can range from a child accessing 1 hour in regular ed and the rest in a self-contained classroom, or all the way to they only get pulled out for 30 minutes a week for a specific service. So least restrictive environment is stated in the law. I just read it to you. However, it does need to be individually considered. We'll talk about extended school year, which is the ESY that we talk about quite frequently. And this is something that comes up often leaving early intervention because some districts don't even have early childhood programs, or they don't have summer school programs at all. So what does extended school year look like? So here's what the law says. Each public agency must ensure that extended school year services are available as necessary to provide FAPE, also known as free appropriate public education. Extended school year services must be provided only if a child's IEP team determines on an individual basis that the services are necessary for the provision of FAPE to the child. This should not be mistaken for the local education agency summer school offering general education classes. So a lot of times that's what will happen. A parent will call me and they'll say, you know, I went for my IEP and they offered us extended school year, but we have to pay for the summer school programming. If that is the case, that is not extended school year. That is the district summer school, which is great and oftentimes will be suited, but an extended school year is for children who are showing such significant delay, or for children that if they don't have some summer school programming, we're going to have to start from scratch at the beginning of the year. So these kids need this summer school programming. It's very limited in each district. They don't have a full-on, you know, 8 to 2 class going on that would be specific for children who have significant delays. Many times our kids do not get extended school year, so it is important for parents to understand the actual definition of what that is. So what is an ISP? This is something I like to hit on because it's important to understand the difference between an ISP, or an individual service plan, and that of an IEP, that individual education plan that we're going to go into detail on. So parentally placed children with disabilities do not have an individual entitlement to services they would receive if they were enrolled in a public school. Instead, the local ed agency is required to spend a proportionate amount of IDEA federal funds to provide equitable services to this group of children. So basically put, to make this understood, every local education agency has a lump sum of funds that they can utilize for children who are placed in private placement by their parents. So say, for instance, you have a child, the mom and dad went to Catholic school and they want their child to go to Catholic school. They will not get the same rights they would get at the regular school district school because the parents have chosen it. It doesn't mean that they get nothing, but they get whatever the school deems they want to give them. So it's important for parents to understand, who want to place their children privately, that their protection under the law is limited. Child fine. The definition of that, under the child fine requirements, state education agencies and local education agencies are obligated to locate, identify, and evaluate all children residing in the state who are suspected of having a disability under Part B of IDEA, so that a free, appropriate public education can be made available to all eligible children. Activities undertaken to carry out child fines for parentally placed private school students must be comparable to activities undertaken for child fines for students in public schools. In determining how and when to carry out child fines, LEAs must consult with appropriate representatives of parentally placed private school students with disabilities. So this is basically those kids that might already be in a school that seem to be in need of special ed. They may seem to have something that isn't along the normal trajectory. So those kids, in order to find them, there's an obligation for reporting those children. So we're going to just rush through a little bit of the IDEA laws. So in the sections, there is a section on evaluation. When you are giving evaluation to any child, it's very important that you explain what types of evaluation you're doing, what types can be done, and what we're looking for with those evaluations so that parents understand. It's also important to help parents understand how they are graded. A lot of times they'll say, oh, your child's hitting the 50th percentile, they're doing great. And that parent might hear you say, oh, your child scored 50%. And they think, wait a minute, how can an F be great? So we have to make sure that they understand at least the basics of the bell curve, which is a lot of our evaluations are done on that plane, so that they understand that a 50th percentile is in fact not 50%, and that we would be happy to have most of our kids there or better in the system. So just explaining that to them and what it's looking for is a good idea. I often tell parents as well to make sure that if there are sub-tests within evaluations that are done on their child, that they know what those are. Sometimes you can have an evaluation that has two sections. And on one of those sections, the child did extremely poor, and on the other one, they did extremely well. If we average that test score, then they do okay. So we want to make sure that we're looking at those subtests as well and making parents understand that those subtests are there. Why do we want to make parents understand it? Because my hope is that all of you are telling them what those subtests are. That does not mean that their local education agency is always going to share that information. So it's good for them to ask those questions. It's also, school districts cannot legally state to a family, we cannot give you the evaluations before our meeting. You can only have it that day. That is not true. They should receive the evaluations at least a week prior to the meeting in order to be able to look at those evaluations, have questions answered before they sit down to meet. It's imperative that parents know that because a lot of times they're told they cannot have those evaluations. Eligibility. Disability alone does not make a child eligible for an IEP under IDEA. This is where that 504 plan would come into place if the child has a disability, but they do not show that they are eligible for an IEP because they are not showing any delay or need for specialized instruction. So just because a child has a disability does not mean that they are automatically eligible for an IEP. That process needs to be scrutinized by doing evaluations and talking with the IEP team. IEPs are the living document, the contract between the local school district and the parent for that child's education programming. It should be very specific, very succinct. Information should be in detail, ad nauseum almost, so that things are not forgotten. IEPs should always be written to the stranger. And by that, I mean it should be written so specifically that if a stranger were to walk into the classroom to teach a class for the first time, he would know exactly what that child's requirements were under IDEA. And placement. Placement should always be the last thing we talk about in an IEP meeting. First of all, we're going to talk about eligibility. If the child is eligible, we move forward to talk about goals. And we're going to write up goals. Once those goals are written up, then we start talking about placement and how we can implement a placement that will solidly help the child attain those goals. Placement should never be considered a building. So when districts say things like, oh yes, all of our deaf and hard of hearing students go to Jackson School, that is not correct because we're not looking at the individual needs of a child. So it's important that that information is provided. So let's talk about the actual physical document and what is included in it. An IEP is a written statement for each child with a disability that is developed, reviewed, and revised in accordance with this section. So this is for each individual child. It is a 24-page document blank. So that is before we even put the name of the student. It is 24 pages. Typically, when you leave the IEP meeting, it is at least a double that. It is a big document. Included in that are present level of performance. How is the child doing today? What is the exact snapshot of where they are today? Statement of measurable goals. We've said this child is eligible. What are our measurable goals that we're going to do? What is the statement for those? Included in that is how progress to those goals will be measured. They have to be specific. We can't just say things like, the child will learn all of their primary colors in 1 year. We need to break those down into quarters or trimesters depending on the school, and that child should be increasing their ability for each goal until the end result is to fully implement that goal. They've got it. They don't need to redraw it. They shouldn't be super easy. They don't always have to be attainable. They should be challenging. Unless our child is incapable and we know they're incapable, then they should be challenging. Even children who we think cognitively could not do something, we should still be challenging them. Every child, no matter what disability, has something that they can do really, really well. We need to hone in on those. The statement of education-related services and supplementary aids are also included. That could be transportation, that could be any of those types of things. Statement of accommodations is also included. Remember when I talked about the 504 plan, I said that that is for accommodations only. If you have an IEP, you do not need a 504 also. Your accommodations would be included in the IEP document. You do not need those. And the date of start of service. For most of you, it's their third birthday or the first school day. All right, so here is the team. So we're going to develop a team just similar to the IFSP team. We have people who work with the child. We have a service coordinator. We have the parents. When they move to the local ed agency, the team participants are a parent, hopefully both of them. I often tell parents also if they cannot both attend, they should bring someone else, an aunt, a cousin, a sister, somebody that can be there with them because it can be a very stressful event. If a parent starts to cry, is upset, someone else being there to comfort them or to ask for a break is really, really important. One or more regular education teachers, because all children are expected to follow standardized curriculum. So we need someone in there saying, well, children this age under the general curriculum is required to learn this in this school year. One or more special education teachers, a representative of the local ed agency. This is the person that can say yes to any request. It's typically the principal of their local school. It could be a special ed coordinator or director from the district, but it's someone that is there that can answer questions and make the decisions on placement or things that might be unusual. Any individual who can interpret test results. This is where I tell parents that are leaving early intervention and moving into the school district to invite their EI providers to the meetings because they're not often invited to the physical IEP meeting. They will be at the transition meeting, but not the IEP meeting. If your school district is taking the assessments from the early intervention team, invite those early interventionists to disseminate those results. Other individuals with expertise regarding the child, so anyone else. What if the child has a private nurse or the child has an interpreter or an aide? Those types of people have expertise. And when appropriate, the child. We often talk about when is that time right. We really need to go with the child. It's not going to be when they're turning 3. They're too young. It may be when they're entering 2nd or 3rd grade. Although we have to be careful. We don't want to share all of the dreary negative things that we share in IEP meetings with a child, but they can come in for part of it. By law, when they're 14 and a half, they have to attend, and in fact, they have to run their IEP meetings for the duration of their school term. This is a special education continuum that I designed, and it talks about environments that are more inclusive and most restrictive. So as you can see, this upside down diagram shows that the most inclusive are students placed in gen ed classrooms with no additional or specialized assistance. So those are your general ed kids. Those are your kids who have a disability, but really they're doing fine. They don't need any special ed. They don't need anything. All the way down, if you look at the most restricted, you see students educated through homebound or hospital instruction programs. Obviously, those are the most restrictive. They are not with their same age peers. they are not with anyone in the education setting. This is just a good snapshot for you to be able to see, what that can look like and all the in-betweens that are there as well. So when we're talking about placement, there are many different ways that we can do placement. So like I told you at the beginning, my background is in deafness. So I'm going to just talk about that just so you guys can see a snapshot. So there are different types of placement that can come about for children who are deaf and hard of hearing, and a lot of times it depends on the communication methodology that is used. So in this instance, I'm going to say there are 3 placement options: a general education setting, a total communication class, and a spoken communication class. So what does that mean? Does it mean if I go to one of the classes, I am not entitled to other services? As you can see in the middle of this diagram, you see co-teaching, educational audiology services, speech or language, etc. All of those services can be provided at any one of those placements. So all of that stuff can be given and provided to the student regardless of where they are physically housed. So it's great to understand for families, if they're going to place their child in this one location, that those other things can be provided as well. All right, we already talked about private placement and what the law states. So private placement has 2 different meanings under IDEA. First of all, if it's placed by the parent, which we spoke of before, parent wants to send their child to a Catholic school, that is fully going to be the responsibility of the parent. They can have that individual service plan, but like I said, it's going to have limited protection under the law. If, however, the IEP team deems that the right placement for the student is in a private school, the team agrees to it, then that is an IEP-placed child. It is as though they are placing them in the neighborhood school. They will have full protection at that private placement. So it just depends whether it's placed by the child or placed by the family or placed by the team. So next question. When a parent makes a unilateral decision to place their child in a private school, who is responsible for the tuition?
All right, the polling function, find that 4th box under your name. You should have 4 choices there, A, B, C, or D. So Andrea just shared this information, so we'll give you a few minutes to think that one through and put your appropriate response in the poll. So we'll give folks a few minutes to think that one through. And if you need to, you can certainly chat your response. A few more seconds, waiting on a few more responses. All right, let me post those results here. So almost unanimously, folks said B, the parent. Is that correct?
That is correct. So if the parent makes a unilateral, one-sided decision without the team to place their child privately, they would be entitled to, they would be the ones that have to pay that tuition. All right. Procedural safeguards, those are basically the protections for the family that law provides. So every year when a family has an IEP meeting, they receive a copy of the procedural safeguards. These are basically the rules of the law. It's important that parents read them. I can say with full honesty that I didn't know the importance of them, so for the first few years I didn't read them, but now I read them every year just because it gives you, what is your protection? What if this happens? What can I do? It has that information in there. Due process is the last resort. I hope that no parent has to do it. Sometimes it's required. Due process hearings are, we've tried everything. We've tried meetings, we've tried due process, or we've tried mediation meetings through the school district, through the State Board of Ed. Nothing is happening. No one can come to agreement. Then a due process hearing would be provided. It's long, it's court, it's lawyers, it's difficult. They also in the law talk about discipline. If a child has a disability, that impedes their behavior and they have discipline issues because of that disability, they need to have what we call a behavior plan put into place. If we have a child, for instance, who has bipolar disorder, and when the child is touched, she grabs something and tries to stab the individual who is touching her, we need to put a behavior plan into place that is followed step by step so that the child can be calmed and the scissors can be removed from the child. If we didn't have that procedure in place, the child would be subject to the rules of the school, which means that they would be suspended or expelled. So if a child has a disability that impedes their behavior, they must have a behavior plan in place in order to be protected under IDEA.
All right, we had a question from Jennifer, and Jennifer wanted to know if a child with an autism diagnosis is denied an IEP based on the school's evaluation, and the family goes to get a second evaluation from an outside source, does the school have to consider the results from the second evaluation?
By the law, yes, they do. If they still read it and they say, we still don't agree, then by law, the parents can request at the district's expense an independent evaluation. This is done by someone that is not affiliated with the school, and it would be that third step. So, yes, they would have to request it. But yes, the district is by law required to take all information that the family provides into consideration. They don't often. And when I get calls like that from families, I show them in the law where it states that all information provided must be considered. So the option or the alternate there would be that individual, that independent evaluation that can be requested to the school district at school district system.
And is that done through, how is that requested?
Through the state, through the person who you've been setting everything up with. It could be the special ed coordinator or your child, whoever is working on the information from the school.
And is that done in writing? Is there like a form or?
Nope, it's just done in writing. Even I always tell families, even if they verbally request it, to request it in writing as well. The district has two choices at that point. Either yes, and they provide a list of evaluators, or no, and a due process hearing would be requested.
Okay.
The one thing, I hear things like that often, and my concern with that is, are they using one evaluation to determine need for this child? We really need to be globally looking at the child. We need to think of their social and emotional needs as well. We can't just look at academic needs or academic concerns. We need to look at the child as a whole, because education isn't just about learning math and writing and reading. It's about socialization as well. So I think that this family would have an advantage to say, hey, are we looking at all the social and emotional for this child also?
Awesome. All right. We have one other question from Megan, and I actually addressed it in the chat. She had asked about just clarification on how EI providers can attend IEP meetings because don't they happen after 3? So I shared that most the IEP meetings are supposed to happen before age 3, and that providers can go and utilize IFSP development time to participate. Do you have anything you would like to add to that?
No, I read that earlier, and that's a great explanation.
Okay, all right.
And I see Jennifer just clarified what's specifically going on with her with the client that she's working with. You know what? Not being potty trained is not a reason for denial of services. So, I mean, that family needs to do one of two things: get a private advocate to work with them, so that the advocate can remind the school district of what the law states. Potty training may be a great goal for that child if this is where we're having difficulties. If that disability can, exacerbate the ability for this child to be potty trained at the normal level of 2 to 3, then that needs to be addressed as well. That's part of the child as a whole. Yes, adaptive skills, perfectly. Yeah, so I mean, if that's what is to be requested, adaptive skills could certainly be call for an IEP and could certainly be, there could be goals written toward that. So sometimes it's just having more open communication with the school district and I always say, tell the parent to ask the school district, help me understand this because it doesn't make sense to me why we're being denied.
All right. Those are the only questions that I saw. So if you're ready, we can go ahead and move forward.
All right. So now we're going to talk about advocacy, and this is the intricacies of starting out well with the school district. I get too many calls where they've already had a very hostile meeting with their school district, and once that happens, it's really, really hard to fix that relationship. So I call my class protecting that parent-school relationship because it's so important that basically we all wear our big kid pants at these meetings and act like adults. It's not easy. Parents aren't thinking with their brain as much as they're thinking with their heart. These are our children, they're our life, and we go in there emotionally charged, but it's important that we explain to the families that getting mad, getting frustrated isn't going to get us anywhere. So let's talk a little bit about that, and hopefully you guys can share some of this information with your families. So to advocate is to succeed. Our children need our strength to ensure that they are getting the proper education. We are their voice until they can voice for themselves. Let's talk about those crazy parents, right? We are confused, dumbfounded. We didn't have the survey that came home when we got pregnant saying, oh, would you like to have a child with this disability, or this disability? No, that didn't happen. Obviously, we didn't sign up for the child that we got, but we love that child just the same. We're just confused. We don't know how to do this. Help the parents along. How does advocating make a parent feel? Like this guy, really nervous, really scared, intimidated. The thought of that first IEP meeting, they're leaving the comfort of their early intervention team, right? The comfort of you guys come into their home and you're part of their family for 3 years. Now they're going to have to put their kid on a bus and send them to school. It's terrifying. Parents also want what is best. It used to be said that if you use the word best in your IEP meeting, it's going to put a pause to the meeting. But let's face it, parents do want what is best. Just tell them that we need to think more on the lines of appropriate. And sometimes, if parents want more than that appropriate, they have to do it outside of the school. That's just part of being a parent. When dealing with parents, when parents deal with school districts, it's important when a question comes or a request is made that we ask these 5 W's, the H, and the E. What is this for? Who needs it? Why do they need it? Etc. Understand why things are being requested. It helps to make the whole entire team more on the same page. Because sometimes we just have no clue. We give them whatever they want, but just a simple request for why is a good idea. So let's talk about the 2 roles. The parent's role. This is a statement that I say to every parent that goes through my training. If your child does not receive an appropriate education and master the skills necessary to be an independent, self-sufficient member of the community, they will be the ones to deal with the outcome. They will be the one that have a 42-year-old living in their basement. Most parents do not want that. Even if they are parents of 2- and 3-year-olds, they do not want that. Not because they don't love their children, but because they do love their children. They want them to have that independent life that they were provided as well. We need them to understand that these children are capable of that. Here is the role of the parent. They need to plan for their child's educational future, advocate for that educational future. They have to manage their child's current education, especially when their children are incapable of managing it themselves. And they need to maintain contact with their child's teachers and support educators to work as a team. Education should continue at home. So it shouldn't just be happening during a school day. The school's position. It's shocking to say that, actually, I'm going to ask this question first, and then I'll talk about it. Each general education classroom head what percentage of students either under an IEP or a 504?
All right, so find your polling function under your name, fourth box. By now that should be old hat here. We'll give folks a few seconds to think that one through. Each general education classroom has what percentage of students either under an IEP or a 504 plan? Give folks a few seconds. That fourth box under your name, or you can chat it in if you need to. All right, let's see here. Looks like most folks think around 30%, but if you think it's a little less.
What's that? And a few people think it's less.
But if you think it's a little less, yeah.
Yep. Yep, it is actually around 30%. So if we think of that, then we can understand why the school has the attitude that they have. So the information that I'm sharing on this slide was provided from a survey that was given to principals. And so you'll see in the next few slides what their interpretation of children with special needs is. But public schools offer a standardized curriculum that children are expected to learn. We know that, right? School districts have a chain of command, and more frequently than not, the person with the authority to make decisions isn't even part of your IEP team. Power flows from the top. So teachers and parents do not have the authority to make decisions that involve a commitment of resources. In other words, money. Teachers and parents have the legal right to make recommendations that are validated in some way. I always tell families if they are requesting something, they better have a valid reason why that something they're asking for would be necessary. And invisible members that have the power to make decisions are typically not even in attendance. This is why schools do not want to do things. They don't want to make exceptions. They have their one-size-fits-all mentality, or they don't understand or believe in individualized programs. Here was a survey sent out, and these are the 10 reasons why schools say no to families' requests. They don't want to change. They don't want to make exceptions. They definitely don't want to set a precedent. They don't even have a program. They're committed to their one-size-fits-all services. They believe the services requested are too expensive. They are completely overwhelmed by the child's needs. They don't understand the legal requirements. This is a class that is not taught in college or special educators, typically. The staff is not trained to meet your child's needs. They don't even have staff to meet your child's needs. So, understanding that much information, can you imagine you're a general education teacher, you have 30% of your kids who are on IEPs or 504s that require these specialized programs. Imagine how frustrating it can be. And that is why I always tell families to be willing to be practicing, participating team members, and let the teachers know that. And let the teachers know they're not alone. It's very important. So when we're dealing with anybody, if everything isn't perfect, what do we do next? Communication is key. We need to be able to communicate. We need to be able to have open lines of the communication. We don't need to hide things from each other. Make sure that everyone is well aware of what is going on at home and at school. Effective communicators control their emotions. I always point out the guy in the middle here. I call him Ugly Cry Guy. That makes everybody in the meeting uncomfortable, including Ugly Cry Guy. And we've got yelling moms down at the bottom. We need to be really, really good at controlling those emotions. They make a meeting go sour very, very quickly. Always ask questions. And if an answer doesn't come, ask it again in a different way. And if it still doesn't come, then my guess is that the person that answered that question isn't at the meeting, and a follow-up email will have to be done. Be willing to work together with the district. Tell the families. Tell your district you're willing to work with them. You want to work as a team. Knowing personality types is really important as well. Getting a feel for who's on your team, because there's going to be people that are conflict avoiders or know-it-alls or bullies or complainers. Understanding those personality types and knowing how to work with them is really important as well. So common parent school problems, they have different views of the child. Someone has not provided the information needed. They don't have options. There's hidden issues, or someone's been it's shown that they're just devalued. We don't know if we don't even think you know what you're talking about. Or poor communication and intimidation, as well as loss of trust. So a few things that may lead to crisis for an IEP team is if the school makes a unilateral decision. They've already placed the child before the family sits down at that meeting. That's a unilateral decision. They're not taking into account what the family has to say or any other professionals at the table. The school ignores information from others, as we got that question just a little bit ago. They're not taking the information from the other professional. That's going to cause crisis. Or if the decision or action may harm the child. So it's imperative that families, moms and dads, control their emotions. But not only them, professionals need to as well. Sometimes professionals also take it personally, get upset, storm out of rooms, throw down books, say they do not want to work with this family. That makes it really hard if they're the only speech-language pathologist and you need a speech-language pathologist. So it's important that everybody be calm, everybody be willing to work together and willing to state that fact. Tips in regard to controlling emotions, just keep them in check. Be careful about really revealing emotions to families. Like a lot of times we're talking to a specialist in this area and they say, oh, I think the principal is wrong in this situation. That just causes so much emotion in the team dynamic, that it's better than to just not say it. It's better to just work through it as a team. Plan time, thinking, planning, and preparing, not throwing tantrums. Pick your battles. Take a look at this picture. What do you think is going to happen to that hound dog? We all know what's going to happen, and there are many parents who would make the wrong decision in this situation, unfortunately. So the more we tell them not to, the more they won't.
All right. Boy, that was a lot of good information. Now is another question break. We're actually coming toward the end of our webinar, so I see a few people chatting. I'm waiting on some responses. So if you have any questions at all, now is the time to put them in. In the meantime, while we're waiting to see if a couple questions come up, Andrea, I want to thank you for a well-informative and entertaining isn't the right word, but it's a captivating webinar. Looks like Ivana's got a statement that says, I don't like it when EI providers prep families for a fight for school services. I think that sets for a bad tone. So, that's actually something that maybe you can follow up on a little bit. I mean, it's, there's some preparation, but there's also the right way and wrong way to do about that. You want to talk a little bit about that, Andrea?
Oh, absolutely. And that's all that part of maintaining those good relationships and not going in there for a fight. And I think that sometimes EI providers know what's going to happen in that district, but it's not always the same. Because if a good, educated parent goes in there, the fight may occur, but it doesn't have to be like a fight. Like going in there with both guns blazing isn't going to help you. In fact, those families that do that, and unfortunately if EI providers are sharing that information, it's not a good idea. They could say, well, no, we don't have, I know that other people have asked for this service before and they haven't received it, but that doesn't mean that we won't, make it a positive experience. Make sure that the parents are prepared as to why they want a specific service or why what they're going to fight for could be an issue, as opposed to saying, we're going to have to fight, you should bring an attorney, you should bring an advocate. Really just letting them know that this is a team, and the more the parent knows and understands about their legal right to be at that table, the better off the team approach is. So I think just instead of having ammo in our gun, having ammo in the things that we're requesting, and having validated reasons as to why what we're requesting is a good request. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that is such a valid point, is that parents need to understand, need to be clear in their own minds why they're asking for what they're asking. Because a lot of times parents just think that they need certain things. And one of the things that pops in my mind, it always comes up at transition discussions, is an individualized aid or personal care assistant, depending on what the school district calls them at that particular location, as to, well, why do you, as a parent, why do you think your child needs that? And as parents start kind of thinking through that, oftentimes they come to the conclusion that maybe they don't necessarily. I know as a parent of a young man with cerebral palsy, that was something that was one of those things that I fought for many years, until I realized that I was kind of setting not only him up a little bit, but the school up, because by having that individualized aid with him, that person, while being very helpful, also presented a barrier to other children approaching my son, and my son accessing other children, just by the nature of an adult being at your side. And also the issue of codependency. That person began to anticipate what my son needed, and my son learned, he's smart, he knows how to work people, and learned that, you know, he didn't have to work so hard to get things done because the person would already anticipate. So, I mean, after a few years, I figured out maybe I shouldn't be pushing so hard for that, because he needs to be able to have his needs assisted by everyone, not just one. So I don't know if that's a valid also kind of thing as well, but I don't see any other questions here. Andrea, do you have anything else you want to add?
You know, so I do advocacy and IDEA trainings for parents of children who are deaf, hard of hearing, blind or visually impaired, or deaf-blind. But my trainings could be for any parent. So if you guys want to, you could go, just, you know, bookmark the Illinois School for the Deaf website, which is Illinois spelled out deaf.org. If you go under the outreach training tab, I do those trainings, and they're typically a 6-hour, one-day training for families. Feel free to tell them to contact me, because although I do give examples of that specific disability category, it does not mean that this class would not be a benefit to them. It certainly would be, and I've had many parents with all different disabilities within those classes. So it's something, if you have a family that's really struggling, to definitely keep that in mind.
Thank you. All right.
There's no dash between Illinois and deaf.
Oh, okay. So it's just www.illinoisdeaf.org. All right, there you go. Okay, awesome. Well, Andrea, I want to thank you again for your information. And folks, as I said in the very beginning, after the webinar is over, I mean, in fact, it should probably be in your inbox in the next few minutes, the survey that I referred to. Complete that survey, which is the evaluation of the training, and within 24 hours, you should get your certificate of attendance. If you don't get that email, or you have any problems with it, contact the EI Training Program at eitraining@illinois.edu, and that individual there can help you with that. Otherwise, be sure to, you know, we are at the end of our fiscal year at the training program, but we did get our contract to continue being the trainer option for the Department of Human Services Early Intervention Program. So you should start checking our website again and start looking for new trainings that are going to be posted now that we know that we can do them. And so you'll start seeing our calendar of events starting to increase. And we'll be doing more webinars like this, more face-to-face, more institutes, all sorts of options will become available. So be on the lookout for that. And with that being said, I'm going to conclude our webinar for today. Wish you all a great rest of your week, rest of the day, and see you at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone. Okay.
Hello.
Oh, hang on.